Hi, I'm Vicky Leaney and I am on the Mental Health Pathway of the Blended Learning PhD programme at Lancaster University. My supervisors are Dr. Heather Robinson and Dr. Caroline Swarbrick, and I'm in the very final stages of completing my thesis, currently editing and rewriting, and I'm hoping to submit on the 1st of June, so fingers crossed. Almost there. So as you can imagine, it's very difficult to put my entire thesis into this one poster. So I'll do the best I can. I've actually focused on the actual development of the theory because that's kind of like what I'm trying to get across to everybody. Okay, let me zoom in so you can actually see what's going on. Give me a second. Okay, the background. It's essentially that ADHD has historically been thought of as mostly a childhood condition affecting mostly boys. You tend to think of like naughty boys at the back of the classroom swinging on their chairs, although thoughts on this are now changing in recent years, and the fact that women and girls actually present with very different symptoms than boys and men do, and we're doing research into why that is and how they can be represented in the research. The main research question is, how do biopsychosocial factors account for the experience of women diagnosed with ADHD in adulthood? Biopsychosocial being biological, psychological, and social factors that account for, as it says there, for the experience, the world that the woman lives in when she has been undiagnosed with ADHD until adulthood. And as I said before, the aim of the study is to develop the feminist biopsychosocial theory of ADHD. With the study being of a lived experience of women, I've actually used myself as a case study in the form of an analytic autoethnography. This is a bit controversial for some because some people feel that autoethnography is perhaps a bit too autobiographical or perhaps a bit too evocative. Whereas I've chosen the other end of the spectrum here with analytic autoethnography, as you can see here. And we've got the 5 core elements, which I hope you will agree makes it more agreeable to an academic study. So the complete member researcher is myself, being a member of the group that I am investigating. So that's women that are diagnosed with ADHD as an adult. The analytic reflexivity is my writing and engaging with the culture and the phenomenon that is under investigation, and the narrative visibility of the research itself is me being in the research, which I definitely am. Then you have the dialogue with information beyond the self, and that is where the blog post analysis comes in. So you can see below there in the data collection bits, which I'll talk about in a moment, and a commitment to an analytic agenda is basically it's showing that it's not focused purely on me, although I'm using myself as the window into the culture and the experience, but I'm engaging with the scholarly theory around it. That's essentially what that's saying here. And then the data that's collected, so you got the personal journals from the last 9 years. There was a criteria that had to be met for every journal entry that was included in the data collection and analysis. Then the autoethnographic exercises by Chang there included things like engaging with a timeline of events in my life or inventorying myself, But mostly what I did in terms of the autoethnographic exercises is I took the themes that were identified in the literature review, which we'll talk about in the findings in a moment, and then I reflexively engaged in writing around those themes, using my own experience, but also in relation to theory, because that is what analytic autoethnography asks of you. In terms of going beyond the self, I took blog posts from Attitude and ADHD Europe. So Attitude it's a worldwide sort of online e-zine website based in America, but very well known in the neurodivergent world. Both organisations gave me permission to use blog posts from their websites, and the process was of a purposeful sampling method. Essentially, what I did was literally took the first 10 blog posts I saw on those two websites that met the criteria of being from how, as much as I could tell, that the author of the blog post was a cisgender woman over the age of 18 and had been diagnosed with ADHD as an adult. Moving on to the findings, I use an adapted form of thematic analysis based on the Braun and Clark framework, which is a 6-step framework, but I adapted it to my own needs to include critical analysis. And by doing this, I took elements from critical discourse analysis. I have essentially developed my own data analysis methodology, but it's a bit it's too complicated or too much to talk about right here with this poster, so I will just leave it at the fact that it was an adapted form of thematic analysis for the purposes of this poster. Looking at the findings, you can see here that there are 3 different figures, and these are based on the 3 different components of analysis. So we've got the literature review, analytic autoethnography, and the blog post analysis, and all of these data were analysed separately from each other. And as you can see here, that I started off with the overarching heading of biology, psychology, and sociology, and then I identified themes within those overarching headings. Although they were analysed separately, there are, of course, some overlaps, as you would expect. Then moving on to the theory, the development of the feminist biopsychosocial theory of ADHD, or FBPSA. This is kind of what my entire thesis has been leading up to, and other than my supervisors, you are the first people to see it, so I hope you like it. So again, it's quite a comprehensive theory. I can't really go into great depth in here on the poster, so I'm just going to do really top line. But I have developed some foundational components based on the research paradigm, and then I have used, and you can see in figure 4, the triangulation of the findings and theories. So you've got the literature review with the established theory, and then we've got the lived experience being the autoethnography and the blog posts, and then the context is created by the feminist theory and the history. And then in figure 5 is my baby. This is my proposed theory. It's been informed by Wade and Halligan's biopsychosocial theory, but also by critical discourse analysis, which can be seen by the macro, meso, micro levels. Talking about this theory from a top-down approach, you can see you've got the ideology and the socio-historical in the macro level. So this is in terms of our overall culture, so it could be our education, our political systems, and everything that's working from the top that creates the culture and society that we live in. And through a critical feminist lens, we're looking at structural sexism, ableism because of ADHD being potentially disabling, and then you've got the gender health inequality, because in the findings we found that there was some gaslighting and various things around a gender pay gap. And they've got the socio-historical, because the history of women's mental health and history of ADHD obviously have all led up to what we experience now in the present. And then we move down to the meso level, which is kind of in between the overarching sort of ideology, the structure of society, but then not quite at the individual level, which is the micro. So the meso is the social factors. The social factors part of the biopsychosocial theory. And here the findings were sort of social interactions. ACEs are adverse childhood experiences. We've got gender discrimination and the impact of daily life. And then we go down to the micro level, being the individual. So the biological factors are hormones and the genetics, and the psychological factors are the women in the study experience shame and failure, feelings of shame and failure. And then right at the bottom there, we've got pathology. This is the undiagnosed ADHD until adulthood in women. By this I mean the consequences of not being diagnosed until an adult, and how that can then potentially go as a bottom-up approach, because that person, that woman, was not diagnosed with ADHD as a child, and how that could potentially have caused more shame and failure, caused more mental health issues, etc. And then it works in the opposite direction, going bottom all the way up. And then you can see the post-traumatic growth. This was a really great theme that we identified, both in the autoethnography and in the blog post analysis, and I wasn't expecting it, but the post-traumatic growth seemed to be an element of having been through such difficulty, and how the positives that can come out of it. For me, that can be doing my PhD. That for me is a really positive thing that's come out of my experience. There were women in the blog post analysis that were talking about how they'd started their own businesses and things because they felt that they couldn't work for someone else. So it sat slightly outside of the model because not all of the women were experiencing this. And then if you look down at the clinical significance, I think my supervisors and I felt that this was quite a big thing, that we could potentially find out why some women are experiencing this post-traumatic growth and others are not, and then using that to positively create a psychoeducational program that would improve the lives of women that are experiencing maybe the negative impact of ADHD. So we felt that there was some huge sort of positive things that could be built up around that. And that is it. You got the references at the bottom. I mean, very top line. I'm sorry I had like whistle top tour, but I hope that made sense and that you enjoyed it. And and there's my poster in its entirety, and I look forward to hearing from anyone who has any questions, and feel free to contact me. And thank you very much.